Hello and welcome to another episode of the Popcorn Conspiracy. I'm Dave G, and joining me tonight is my co-host.
Hello everybody, I'm Kyle.
And tonight we're going to be taking a look at the brand new Nicolas Cage movie that's now out on VOD and also DVD Blu-ray. It's called Color Out of Space, and basically this movie is one of those films that a lot of people have been kind of looking forward to because of the director. The director is Richard Stanley, who only makes movies now once in a blue moon. Like, he's made a few documentaries over the last few years, but hasn't made a feature film for a great deal of time. And it's based on a H.P. Lovecraft story, but basically it's about a family trying to restart their lives in this kind of beautiful home in a really ancient wood. The ambitious father, Nathan, played by Nicolas Cage, is trying to set up an alpaca farm while trying to mend his relationship with his wife, Teresa, played by Joely Richardson, who is recovering from cancer. Nathan also finds his relationship with his children is pretty strained. His teenage daughter, Lavina, played by Madeline Arthur, is going through kind of a rebellious stage that involves experimenting with Wicca, while his teenage son, Benny, played by Brendan Meyer, is kind of more interested in getting stoned with the hippie neighbor, Ezra, played by Tommy Chong, than what he is trying to help out on the farm. But then all of a sudden everything is kind of thrown haywire as the farm is hit by a meteor. All these strange occurrences start happening straight away, but the authorities tell them that everything's going to be okay. But there's one young hydrologist called Ward, played by Elliot Knight, that kind of warns them that he believes that their water table has been contaminated, and it all happens from there. Now, mate, I've got to ask, what did you think of this movie? Because it's just one of the more unusual kind of films to come out this year.
Yeah, it's one I was definitely looking forward to. Like, I am quite a fan of H.P. Lovecraft and movies that have been based on or inspired by his work. Like, I don't pretend to have read everything he's written, but some movies like Stuart Gordon's Reanimator are among like my favorite horror movies. It's also like undeniable, like the influence that he's had on over horror fiction in general. And many other like filmmakers and writers being influenced by him, like Stephen King and David Cronenberg and John Carpenter and those kind.
And even Riverdale that we're watching on TV now. That's Riverdale. Yeah. They have the Jughead character who's a huge Lovecraft fan, but the entire series is actually inspired by some of Lovecraft's work.
Yeah, and you'll even find like references to his work scattered throughout like non-horror stories, like the name Arkham Asylum from Batman being named after a fictional town which appears in many H.P. Lovecraft stories.
Yep.
I think in the last 10 or 15 years, maybe it's with so much of his work entering the public domain, there's been a real influx, I think, of like comics and novels and movies and card games and video games and everything in between, like made by what I think are creatively bankrupt people who simply want to leech off of his name and notoriety.
Yep.
Also, I think I've noticed there's been like an increased focus on like his supposed racism. Like, personally, I'm not surprised when someone who was around literally 100 years ago has views that are looked at as problematic today. But I was really excited for this movie. One for like Richard Stanley working on another movie, which I'm not sure if this is the first thing that he's made since Island of Dr. Moreau and that whole mess.
Yeah, he's made a few documentaries in between, and he'd done a couple of short films, but yeah, he hadn't actually made a feature film outside of a documentary from when he was fired for Frankenheimer to take over on the Island of Dr. Moreau back in 1996. So it's been a long time between drinks.
And it's like it's a weird movie that I actually really like, but I did quite enjoy it. I enjoy this film. I had some issues with the movie when I watched it. So afterwards, I read the short story that it's based on, and I think a lot of my problems with it stem from things that Richard Stanley and decided to do to maybe shake up or modernize the story, most of which I think take away from the horror or even kind of make the movie feel somewhat derivative of some other films that have been inspired by Lovecraft. But I did, overall, I did enjoy the movie. Just I had some of those little issues with it that I think maybe if the movie had stayed a bit closer to the original source material, it might not have had. Like maybe if it actually was set at the time, like 100 years ago or whatever, when the actual book was set, like instead of trying to modernize it.
Yeah.
But yeah, what did you think of it, dude?
Yeah, look, this was one of those movies that I'm a huge Nicolas Cage fan. I love Nicolas Cage's movies, so I was kind of really, really keen to see it. And yeah, I liked it. One of the things that really hit me with this movie was although it's set in modern times, it feels like the kind of movie that you should be watching on VHS. Like it just has this real retro kind of vibe to it, but it also felt like it's a work where there's a lot of love in it. And I actually got to interview Richard Stanley about this film, and I talked to him about that, and he said that this was a movie that he's always wanted to make because his mum brought him up on Lovecraft's work, and the short story that this is based on has always been his favourite short story, and he wanted to do something with this movie for so long. But I kind of liked it. I've been going through this thing recently where I've been watching like a lot of kind of bad movies from the 80s, things like Bloodstone, Black Rainbow, just stuff like that I've really wanted to kind of watch, that trashy kind of stuff with an 80s vibe. And this movie kind of like, to me, fits into that, even though it's like a modern day film. A lot of the special effects and that Stanley uses in this feels very 80s. It's almost like his career has been like in a time capsule and it hasn't changed from like what he would have done in 1996. But I really liked that, and it kind of made everything feel more manic, like especially when Nicolas Cage's character is like losing his mind. It just, I don't know, it just works. Like when I compare this movie to something like The Wretched that we talked about in the last episode, I just really liked the vibe that this movie had, and for me that like probably made Color Out of Space feel like a better movie than it actually was.
Yeah, like it really did have a unique feel to it, and it did kind of have that. It did have that kind of B movie shine, but it was something. It was still like a really enjoyable movie, and like Nicolas Cage is really like it's something that I think really gave Nicolas Cage the ability to be like it's like a Nicolas Cage kind of freak out movie that is actually quite enjoyable to watch in. I know people really like crapping on Nicolas Cage movies, Wicker Man and this, that, and the other, but like when he's given a movie that really sink his teeth into, it's always quite an enjoyable watch, like this or his Bad Lieutenant movie or something like that. That really allows him to be like as manic as he is here. Like I like what the movie did with the family. Like in the original story, they're like it's just a normal family of farmers, like 100-something years ago, who are suddenly like set upon by this alien invasion of sorts. But yeah, in this movie, the family, as you say, they're all a little wacky to begin with. Like the eldest son is a stoner, the daughter's got an obsession with the occult, and Nathan is quite bizarre already. Like part of his vision of his farm is raising alpacas for some reason,
yeah,
for meat and milk. It's like, what? Like none of that's in the book. Like that was all like original for the movie. It's all something that kind of like really gave it really gave like Nicolas Cage free reign to play the total nutcase in this film as things go on and things elevate and become more and more manic and more insane with the infection of sorts, kind of like polluting his family and polluting the farm. And yeah, it's just he like Nicolas Cage really is the highlight of this film for me, and more yeah, even more than any of the even more than the horror or the special effects of it, just Nicolas Cage just really makes this movie unique, I think.
Yeah, and I also like the fact that Stanley doesn't try to explain or describe what's going on. Like you know that this horror is there and like horrific things are happening, but in so many modern day films these days, it's like everything is explained for the audience. Oh, this creature does this because of this. Like that, yeah, you know what I mean. Like in those scenes, like in the last Godzilla film, where like you have scientists delivering great big slabs of information. It's like this doesn't happen in this movie. Like the audience is almost in the dark as much about what's happening as what the family actually are. And I think I actually prefer it to be that way. Like I hate movies where stuff is explained with like slabs of dialogue. Like, and to me, I like kind of being in the dark of what's happening. This movie's kind of like thrown open wide for there to be a sequel if they want. And yeah, like I was saying, like even in horror movies these days, and like I love the series, like the Conjuring and the Annabelle films, but it almost feels like movies like The Nun only exist in that franchise to explain the horror. Like, oh, you've watched the other movies, but now we're going to show you why that horror happened. So here's a prequel to everything. Whereas with this movie, I like the fact that I don't know exactly what's happened. Like, I know that this event happened, and I know the consequences of it, but I don't know the science of it, kind of thing. And I kind of liked that. I thought that Stanley did a really good job with that, because it kind of does leave the audience in the dark rather than having everything spoon-fed to them or signposted all the way through.
Yeah, like horror and gore is something that people really expect from H.P. Lovecraft movies, thanks to a lot of films based on his works being kind of like that. But yeah, I think Lovecraft was really more about the feeling that I got from his stories that I've read. I think his horror themes stem more from the idea that the universe is such a huge place and humans are such a small, insignificant part of it, that there are things going on that we just can't even comprehend and drive us insane to think about.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's really what Richard Stanley was going for with this movie, because a lot of I guess a lot of what's going on in the movie, like I said, it is stuff that's been changed from the book, because it's a lot more. This movie has a lot more body horror kind of elements to it, and a lot more, like you say, a lot more the unexplained. What exactly is going on? What exactly is this alien infection kind of doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think in the original story, I think like the color out of space is something. It's more like something that's infecting and corrupting the gardener's farm, and crops and animals and even themselves are having the life kind of drained out of them and turning them into basically dried out husks, like kind of like living piles of ash or dust. Like some of the characters towards the end, that's kind of how they're described. And that's kind of the gist that I got of what the alien being was doing throughout the movie, throughout the story. In this movie, it's more bombastic than that. Like there's a lot more kind of ghost movie type things going on, where like car engines are turning on and the cars revving by themselves. Mobile phone communications are being interrupted by sounds of screaming, and there's a lot of weird alien-like bugs appearing, and like there's a lot of, as I said, there's a lot of like David Cronenberg like body horror stuff going on. So like there's a lot of it that's kind of unexplained, and as you say, it's good it's good when a movie doesn't explain that. I think that's what Richard Stanley's really gone for, to kind of make it that it's not such a simple thing. It's just this alien invasion is just draining the life out of these people on this farm. It's like, it's really, there's a lot of more stuff going on, and we don't, like, it's really hard to understand it.
Yeah.
But like one part in particular, I thought felt a bit like it feels 100% like a rip-off from something from John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yeah.
It's completely unique to, like, it's unique to the movie. But I can't help thinking that it was inspired more by, like, Richard Stanley maybe watching other movies that have been inspired by H.P. Lovecraft more than it was by the book. I just want to say it was basically the thing in the barn that happens.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
So it's a while ago that we both watched this movie, but that whole sequence, it, like, me and my brother watching it, we both think, oh yeah, The Thing. You know, like that's when we saw that, just immediately that's what we thought of, and like it makes the movie for a more, like, entertaining, gory spectacle. But I don't know. I guess one would think, like, whether it actually kind of helps the story, or like our understanding of what this unknown alien presence is and what it's doing on Earth. Like it was just, I guess, just in the book, I guess it's a bit more. It's because what the alien presence is doing isn't quite as spectacular as what it's doing in this movie. It's a little bit easier to understand what exactly is going on.
Yeah,
and that was something that, like, I enjoyed. Like I said, it was a spectacle. It's kind of like, like blood and gore and stuff like that. Like, I enjoyed it, but at the same time, like, I was thinking, like, whether it might have been better to. Whether I would have enjoyed it a little bit more if it had kind of reined that in a little bit.
Yeah, there's also a little bit of an environmental theme in there as well, like with what the mayor wants to do and stuff like that. And I think a lot of the stuff that we've seen for the documentaries of Stanley's over the years, environmentalism is a very big thing for him. So to put that in there, and it kind of works, like, because of the fact that it's like the water table that the water table that's become contaminated, because that's something that happens in a lot of third world countries when mining companies come in. They on the surface everything looks fine, but they've contaminated the water table. And I guess even because of, like, the setting, like, this movie was actually shot in Europe, but it's set in America. I guess in a sense that it could also have been fracking, could have been something that he was trying to point out here too, because of the groundwater thing. But I just liked those little bits, and I liked that Stanley didn't try and rope in Nicolas Cage. And, like, I know from when I interviewed him that Stanley said that this is one of those times where it just felt like everything felt right. He wanted Nicolas Cage to make this movie, and out of nowhere, Nicolas Cage rang him when he found out that Richard Stanley was making the film and said, I want to be in this movie. And he said it just felt like one of those things that was right. But I like the fact that Stanley didn't rope in Cage. Like, for me, this performance, it's like Nicolas Cage has been watching Jack Nicholson a lot and been like, oh, well, yeah, I want to do a movie where I get to go Nicholson crazy. And he does it. But, like, a lot of people were saying when this film was, like, in cinemas here that, oh, Nicolas Cage overacts it. And I don't think he does overact it. I think that he does exactly what's kind of called from. And aside from Jack Nicholson, I don't think anybody does crazy quite the same way as Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, like I say, he really is kind of the standout part of the movie. And it really... The fact that he's ramped up so much, it does go along with the way that everything else in the movie is ramped up. Even though I was just, like, criticizing that earlier, it fits with the whole B movie vibe that you get from it. If he was kind of just as he was more described in the story, in the original story, it would have been really kind of boring.
Yeah.
You know, instead what you're seeing is more you see a lot more of him in this in the movie than you would have otherwise. And yeah, it's just watching him go, like his family are going crazy, and like just a lot of insane things are going on, and he's just like, and he's freaking out, and like it really, it's kind of thing that, like, if you go into a movie with like a H.P. Lovecraft movie starring Nicolas Cage, this is what you expect. Like, this is kind of what you should know that you're getting into. Like, you're going to get crazy Nicolas Cage, and like I think that it really does. Like, it suits the movie. Like I wouldn't say that. I guess I could say that he's overacting, but it's like I think it really does suit the. It suits the material.
Yeah.
I mean, something story-wise, I talk about things being changed. Like, something I didn't quite like was the insistence of pushing Ward, Elliot Knight's character, as a major character in the story, because he feels he feels a little out of place. Like in the original short story, it's told from the perspective of this land surveyor who's come to investigate an area that's going to be flooded and turned into a reservoir, kind of just like what's happening in the movie. But while doing this, he starts interviewing locals and asking about this bizarre occurrence that happened there like 30 or 40 years ago, and he has this story is relayed to him by this crazy old guy who's the only witness who's still alive and willing to talk about it. So, like, the story, it's kind of relayed to us through this Ward character as a narrator, but in the movie, they've put him smack bag as a active participant in the story itself, which means a lot of things have been changed to kind of validate his existence in the story, that he kind of has no reason to be a part of in the first place. Like, some of it's minor. Like, in the book, the farmer has three sons. In this, one of them is changed into a daughter, so there can be some kind of a romantic kind of subplot there. But also in the short story, Nate, or Nicolas Cage's character, brings in scientists and locals and educated people who investigate what's going on with this meteor and with his crops and his animals. But here, pretty much all of that stuff, all of this stuff is handled by this one character, this Ward character, who, what did you say his profession was? The waterologist, or
he's a hydrologist? Yeah.
Hydrologist, that was it. This hydrologist just happened to show up the very day that a meteor lands on this farm and infects the water under the farm. And he's also an expert on meteors, and he's also an expert on everything else that needs to happen. It just felt like the movie had two lead protagonists at times.
Yeah.
Like Nate and Ward, but we only really care about Nate. This is a Nicolas Cage movie, and so there's times when I was watching Ward and I was like, this movie's kind of treating him a bit like he's a main character, but there's huge 20, 30-minute sections of it where he barely does anything or isn't in the movie at all, because really he's not supposed to be a main character. Like, the actual story is written about, he's just the narrator. He's more of a storyteller character in the original book, that this is something that I've heard, this story that happened on this farm. But he wasn't an actual active part of it. So I didn't think that making him a major character within the story itself, I didn't think that really worked out too well, and I think it might have taken a little bit more focus away from Nicolas Cage. Like, maybe that some of the things, rather than having all these things done by this one character, maybe they should have been, as they were described in the book, as being handled by locals and like local scientists and local smarter people in town, like smarter than Nathan.
Yeah.
I don't know. There was just. Did you? I don't know. Did you find anything like that? Did you kind of think the same thing about Ward's character?
Yeah, it was interesting because at times I felt that this almost became a movie that was more about the kids. Like, and I really loved the performances of Brendan Meyer and Madeline Arthur. Like, I don't think I'd ever come across one of Madeline Arthur's films before, and I loved her performance in this. Like, she had that romantic tension scenes with Elliot Knight, but then she also had like the scenes about like self-harm and stuff like that. And to me, the film at times almost felt like it was being told through the kids' eyes, especially without trying to give anything away, where there's like a huge chunk of time where the adults aren't seen. And I don't know, like, I get that, like, it's a Nicolas Cage movie because he's the big name that's in it, but there were times when this almost felt like a coming-of-age kind of movie that's told through the kids' point of view, and Nicolas Cage is just playing the dad, kind of thing. But, yeah, it is. It's kind of interesting that, in a way, Richard Stanley chooses to do this movie in such a way that it's not really told through one person's eyes, because you kind of see things through multiple eyes. Like, there's even scenes here where you've got characters going off and talking to Ezra, Tommy Chong's character, like in the forest kind of thing, and like Nicolas Cage's character's not there either. So it's kind of weird that the movie does that, but at the same time, I don't know, it almost makes it feel more natural in a sense to me, because you are seeing it through multiple characters' point of views.
I think it like, as you said, like when it's focusing on the family, some of the additions, some of the changes, like you say, Tommy Chong's character, I liked that. You know, like I think had it maybe it just felt a little weird because it was being that it was more like a modern setting, but you actually having less outside influence than you have in the original story, which is set like 100 years in the past. I think I did actually like. I don't know, for some reason I didn't like Ward's character. Like, I did like when they focused on the family, and when they like when the son goes to talk to Tommy Chong's character. I did like that as well. Like this crazy hermit hippie that just lives on their land. That they've just kind of grown to accept. That this guy's just kind of squatting on their land. I liked all that, but I guess just something about Ward's character. I think the way that he's like narrating the opening and closing of the movie, and I don't know, just something about that I didn't quite take to. But most of the other changes to, like I said, not to get into spoilers, but yeah, when it's focusing on the kids more than it is on Nicolas Cage, even then it still works. Just not so much when they put so much on Ward to try to make him a kind of more of a main character than he was.
It also feels with Ward, and my major criticism of his character, it felt like he was the kind of character that they tried to make him an expert in everything. Whereas, like you said, he just happens to know about meteorology and stuff as well as being a hydrologist. Whereas I think they would have been better off if they just kind of left him as a hydrologist, because he kind of came across, and I'm trying to like think which movie it is. It's one of the Transformer movies, but they've got the Australian actress in there, Teresa someone. It's just like going out of my head.
Teresa Palmer.
Yeah, that's right. But they make her an expert in absolutely everything. It's like, why couldn't they have just made a character like a numerologist or something like that like, has come across this big case that involves like robots. But like it really comes across like really forced when they do that kind of thing. It's like The Rock's wife in that
Yeah.
in that remake a couple of years ago of Towering Inferno, where it's like they made her everything. It's like she's a great
Skyscraper, yeah.
she's a great scientist, like a great soldier. It's okay, so leave her as a soldier, but then all of a sudden she has all these other abilities, and it's like it just it becomes really really unbelievable. But I also find it really weird in films that they normally seem to do that with like a side character, like using The Rock again as an example. You think of Rampage, the movie, where his character is an expert with animals, and he is an expert with animals. That's it. Like, there's nothing else added on there. But then in other movies, it feels like when they do these side characters, they have to make them so that they're an expert in this and an expert in that. And I know probably from Richard Stanley's point of view, this movie was made on what the 1 day catering budget of most blockbuster films. So he didn't have a lot of money to hire extra actors, but you kind of almost wonder whether it would have been worth rewriting the script so that perhaps the son had returned from college or something and he was studying one of the things, just so you have two characters combined that have the skills rather than just one character that seems to be like this gifted know-it-all.
Yeah, like, because there are parts where the son is actually like investigating things on his computer while stoned, like things about space and meteors and that kind of stuff. And it's like, as you say, perhaps they could have just focused more on that. Because it did seem to me like something that was like a cost-cutting thing. Okay, we'll just have this one character do all this science stuff, and it didn't work because, like I said, it's quite contrived that this guy just happens, instead of him showing up at this area like 40 years later, and the bizarre things that he comes across leads him to investigate and find out about this story, which is that's what his place was. In the original story. Instead of that, no, he just happens to show up on their farm to investigate the water in the area, and he happens to know about meteors, and he happens to show up the very day that a meteor lands that infects the water in that area. It just, like, it was kind of silly.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of those things these days that I think screenwriters are finding themselves trying to think of more creative ways to do it, because ever since they had that scene in the original Twilight movie where Bella is Googling about vampires, that's become like a saying. Oh, they Twilighted it when someone's looking for information and they go for Google. And like, I just finished watching the new Josh Schwartz series, Looking for Alaska, and there's a scene in that where two of the characters Google. I've got to be careful how I say this so that I don't give something important away. But they Google a mental illness, basically, that they think their friend might have had, and like it works because you actually think, well, how would a high school kid try and find out about how this person would have been acting if that's what they were suffering from? Of course, they're going to use Google. Like, every kid has Google on their phone these days. It's the most obvious way to do it, but it still feels like screenwriters these days try to come up with some really creative way to do it. And whereas here, Richard Stanley's just gone, you know what, I will have one kid Googling stuff, but yeah, just tried to make, I think, Ward too much, whereas it would have just been better off if he'd left Ward as a hydrologist, that there's a little bit of a romantic spark there between the daughter and him. So, yeah, but ultimately I think I did kind of enjoy this movie and the stuff that Stanley did with it. And I guess that leads to the big question, what are you going to give this 1 out of 5 and why?
Yeah, I'm going to give this 3.5 out of 5. I did, like I said, I did really enjoy the film, and I'm glad to hear that Richard Stanley apparently is he's hoping to make some kind of a H.P. Lovecraft trilogy of
Yeah.
films. Like, I do want to see more. I do want to see more H.P. Lovecraft stuff than just like Cthulhu tentacle shit made by people who just want to leech off of his work. Because I'm really getting tired of that. Oh, it's Lovecraftian, you know. It's got tentacles in it, and yeah, I guess I hope that in future movies, like whether he does, I'm not sure which other stories he'd be working on. I know there's some that people would love to see on the big screen, and yeah, just I guess I hope that with those he tries to be a bit more original of himself and allows maybe to stay more closer to the original book, or it's hard because, like you said, there were changes in this movie made to the family and stuff like that, and they worked. But just some of the stuff when it did feel like the body horror elements and stuff, which did kind of feel a little out of place, and it did feel a little derivative of John Carpenter or David Cronenberg. I kind of hope he pulls back on that and just kind of stays a bit more faithful to Lovecraft's original work, and then yeah, I'd be interested to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, definitely. I gave it 3 out of 5. I really did enjoy that kind of 80s vibe. There was little parts of it that did frustrate me at times, but for the most part, I did enjoy it. But I went with 3 out of 5. Loved Nicolas Cage's performance. Loved the teenage characters, the teenage actors' performances here, because I think that they really got put through the ringer with some of the scenes that they had to go through here. So yeah, so it's a 3 out of 5 from me, and that's it for this episode of the Popcorn Conspiracy. Kyle gave the film 3.5 out of 5. I gave it 3 out of 5, but look, if you are a little bit of a fan of cult cinema and you're a Nicolas Cage fan, definitely go and check out Color Out of Space. 3.5 from Kyle, 3 from me. For now, I've been Dave G.
And I've been Kyle.
And we'll be back very, very soon with another episode of The Popcorn Conspiracy.